Did you know the WEF were talking about digital IDs way back in 2016, 4 years before the pandemic? Weird. Hello there, you 5.1 million awakening wonders. Thank you for joining me on this journey of mutual awakening. You tell us stuff, we tell you stuff. Through this discourse, we grow together. There will be moments of angst and fear. That's a necessary part of the journey. But if we go within, if we stay alert, if we communicate clearly, from this mayhem, we can create something beautiful. Not necessarily perfect, but better than what we have now for sure. I'm touring all over the UK. Do you want to participate in this live experience? This ain't just comedy. This is breathwork, meditation, mayhem, embracing beauty. I want you to be a part of it, particularly if you're in Carlisle or Plymouth or Blackpool or Glasgow. There's a link in the description to get your tickets. Now, I've got to tell you about a beautiful conversation I had with Nick Corbishley, who's written a book about Davos, the WEF, Klaus Schwab, all of that stuff. He's unpacked it at depth. This conversation took place on my podcast, Under the Skin, available from Luminary. You can subscribe to it if you want to and if you can afford to. This bit we're giving you for free, our beloved viewers, where he talks about digital IDs and how Microsoft and WEF were talking about proposals to have us all digital ID'd up way back in 2016 and making it more or less mandatory by 2030. I had a crazy conversation with this guy, Nick Corbishley. Myself, I felt like, you know, one of them thriller movies where it's like Liam Neeson or Bruce Willis or Sam Jackson and like they meet a witness or a whistleblower that goes, man, I gotta tell you, I found out all the secrets. You gotta know what they're planning. This stuff's big. Nick Corbishley had that vibe. He's got the kind of frenetic energy of a person that's seen too much. His book is fantastic. There'll be a link in the description to that book as well. But in this conversation, we're talking about digital IDs and the WEF. Across the course of that conversation, we talk in depth about their actual influence and the way that they prime and prepare political candidates. People like Merkel, Blair, Putin, Macron, like your man Trudeau, all these people have been through WF, a sort of politician youth training schemes. I'm sure there's nothing conspiratorial in it, but it's worth informing yourself, right? Stay to the end of this video because you're going to love it, and I want you to hit me up in the comments below in case you think I've missed vital questions.
Yeah, I think that we are very much in danger of kind of sleepwalking into a tech-enabled tyranny. I think that is clearly a possibility, and there are clear interests in pushing this, into making this a reality. In research for my book, I was able to document an interest, or should I say, concerted efforts to get digital identity to just about, well, to everybody on the planet within the next 8 years. So, I mean, by the year 2030. So there's an organization called ID 2020 that very few people know about. I'd never heard of it before I started researching for this book. The ID 2020 Alliance. It was set up in 2016 with seed money from Microsoft, Accenture, PwC, Rockefeller Foundation, Cisco, and Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. So, I mean, it's a very powerful organization, and its founding mission...
In 2016, it was set up.
In 2016. And
when there wasn't a pandemic.
When there wasn't a pandemic. And yeah, we're looking at organizations that you would expect to see pushing this sort of agenda. And their founding mission was to ensure that everybody on planet Earth had a digital ID by 2030. Whether or not we want it, we will have it. I mean, this is kind of like the idea, and it's if you're worried about kind of like a technocratic, concentrated, consolidated control of population, this is kind of a perfect example of that. And in 2019, they published an article where they were talking about how inoculation presented a wonderful opportunity to roll out digital identity. And this was months and months before COVID-19 pandemic began. And they were, I mean, the way they wrote this article was really interesting. They were not talking about how digital identity will help governments manage public healthcare issues and crises. They were talking about how public healthcare issues and crises will allow them to roll out digital identity, and this is exactly what you've seen. If you look at what World Economic Forum, they were talking about digital identity back in 2018. It was the main topic. It was the top topic of the Davos event that year. And they produced an enormous report about how wonderful digital identity would be for the world. So I mean, it's not something that is new. It's something that has been kind of in incubation for quite some time. And my personal feeling, considering you've got an organization like ID 2020 with these sort of backers talking about the wonderful opportunities that inoculation vaccine certificates offer in terms of as a gateway to digital identity, then and that is, in my view, exactly what we're seeing.
When they published that article in 2016, or at least they were founded, you say ID 2020, you said their backers include groups such as Microsoft, that there was an article published where they sort of explained how like visual identity would be, their aims about visual identity. Who's that published for? Is that an academic paper? Is it a business paper? Why would you put obviously when I hear something like that, I feel like, oh man, that's shady. But I feel like, well, then why is there sort of a paper trail like that could lead to conclusions?
I think that there's a paper trail with just about everything that is kind of happening right now. It's the same with the World Economic Forum. You have organizations that are proudly talking about how they can and will exercise greater influence in the future. I mean, the World Economic Forum's founder, who you've covered on a number of occasions, Klaus Schwab, I mean, he talks openly about how we have to use this pandemic as an opportunity to radically restructure the world and to create this kind of totally digitally connected reality, and that is kind of what we're seeing. That is the name of the game. So I think that we, in answer to your question, who is it aimed at? I would say it's aimed at the sort of kind of stakeholders that they would be writing for, the sort of people who might be connected with companies like Microsoft, companies like Accenture, companies like PwC, the Rockefeller Foundation. And the same with, when the World Economic Forum published its report in 2018, Identity in a Digital World, a new chapter in the social contract, it was very clearly a policy piece. They were kind of bragging about the fact that they covered this in their Davos event that year, and they told everybody to go out and to work on these digital identities, and they were very happy to see that this was what was happening. So I think that we live in this world where power has already drifted upwards, or has been taken from us and has been pulled upwards. And to such an extent, I think that's part of the reason why so many of us are so apathetic, because we really have so little influence over how government functions. So we kind of just switch off. And we've seen an organization like the World Economic Forum is so important, is so powerful, it amasses together so many of the largest companies on planet Earth, and yet we kind of treat it almost like in this comical way. If once a year you have the Davos event, and they send a few journalists, they have a few interviews with some very important people, and at the end of it, it's back to normal. We knew that they had a lot of influence in business and economics. It's kind of in the name World Economic Forum. What we didn't know is how much influence they had in the political arena, until I think right now we're beginning to see that seep out. And this is really important, because when we vote for our MPs, we do so on the assumption that they are going to represent our interests or the interests of their constituents. And if they start having governmental roles, ministerial roles, we believe that they are representing the interests of the general population, of the general voters. What we don't realize is that they're going off to the World Economic Forum to get more or less their marching orders and enacting legislation on the kind of basis of what they are learning from the World Economic Forum, what they're being suggested should happen in the World Economic Forum.
What about the bit where he said in 2019 they admitted that inoculation presented a wonderful opportunity for digital IDs? I'm not making any assertions or arrogating any of this complex information. That's not my job. I just want you to have the information, and together we'll work it out, because like that Buddhist monk said, I may be wrong, I may be wrong, I may be wrong. What do I know? I'm just a bloke out of Sarah Marshall. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Give this video a like. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at this one or this one. Or if you're one of the 60% of people that ain't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button and join this movement. Come and see me live if you're in the UK, or if you fancy taking a flight, come over. See me in Glasgow or Blackpool or Hull or Newcastle, Bristol, all fantastic, beautiful cities in this beautiful nation of ours. There's a link in the description to get your tickets. Join my mailing list too if you've got time. You can just click there. Most importantly of all though, stay free.